Good morning, everyone. Today, I would like to share my thoughts on a question that is becoming more important every day. What happens to copyright in the age of artificial intelligence? Let's begin with something familiar. When we read a novel, look at a painting, or listen to a song, we usually think of a human author behind it. Copyright exists to protect that person so they can be recognized and rewarded for their work. But now, AI systems can also create paintings, poems, and even songs. So we need to ask, who is the author when a machine makes the work? Some people say AI is just a tool, like a camera or a paintbrush. In that case, the author is still the human who uses it. But others argue that AI is different, because it can produce things we did not fully predict or control. If creativity involves originality, does the machine contribute something unique? And if so, should it be considered an author? Another question is about fairness. To learn, AI is trained on huge amounts of data, images, music, and texts. Many of these works are copyrighted, but they are used without asking permission from the artists. Imagine you were a painter. You spend years building your own style. Then an AI learns from your art and generates new works in your style, but you get no credit or payment. Is that fair? Or is it exploitation? At the same time, we should recognize that human culture has always been based on borrowing. Shakespeare reused old stories. Jazz musicians improvised on familiar tunes. Hip-hop artists sampled records. Culture grows by remixing. So, is AI just continuing this tradition? Or is it crossing a line because it uses other people's work without consent? This leads to the balance between innovation and protection. If we make the rules too strict, AI may not be able to develop. But if we make them too loose, creators may lose their motivation to produce new works. How can we find the middle ground? There are also ethical issues. For example, AI can now imitate the voice of a singer. Songs can be created that sound as if they were performed by that singer, even as she never sang them. But her voice is part of her identity. Should anyone be allowed to copy it without permission? Is a voice simply a resource or part of a person's dignity? Different countries are trying different solutions. Some say only humans can be authors. Some say AI-generated works can be copyrighted if humans are involved. Others suggest new systems of compensation, like paying a, quote, sampling fee for using training data. But there is no single answer yet. So what should we do as students, citizens, and future creators? I believe we should insist on 3 things. First, transparency. Artists should know if their works are used in AI training. Second, fairness. Creators should have options to refuse or to be compensated. Third, respect. I should not replace human creativity, but should support it. In the end, AI is not the enemy and not the hero. It is a tool. But how we use it will decide whether it enriches our culture or undermines it. Copyright is not only about money. It is about justice, dignity, and the value of human imagination. So I want to leave you with this question. In the age of AI, how can we protect human creativity while still encouraging innovation? The answer is not easy, but the discussion is necessary. And maybe our generation will be the one to find it. Thank you.
All right, listeners. Tonight we are spinning a track that's not just beats and bass, it's law, art, and the future of creativity. The set is called AI and Copyright, and the rhythm goes like this. Who owns the music, the image, the words, when the DJ is a machine? Let's drop the first beat, sampling. Hip-hop taught us that taking a riff, looping it, and layering a new voice can create something fresh. But it also taught us about lawsuits, permissions, and royalties. Now imagine AI as the ultimate sampler. It trains on millions of songs, paintings, stories. Out comes a new track. Is that a remix? Or is it theft? This is the tension we face. Artists say, work is my livelihood. If AI learns my style and floods the market with copies, what's left for me? Tech voices answer, the out culture has always borrowed, always remixed. Shakespeare borrowed plots, jazz borrowed melodies. Why should AI be treated differently? And here the beat becomes a debate. Second drop, authorship. When AI generates a painting in the style of Van Gogh, who is the author? The AI? The programmer? The user who typed the prompt? Copyright law grew up assuming a human creator. But now the DJ booth has a new player who isn't human. If authorship defines ownership, do we give machines rights? Or do we always trace it back to people? Third track, fair use versus monopoly. Copyright is meant to reward creators, but also to serve the public good. Too weak, and artists starve. Too strong, and creativity freezes. AI pushes this balance to the edge. If training on data counts as infringement, then AI may not learn at all. If everything is free to use, artists may lose incentive to create. Which groove do we choose? Let's not forget the real-world cases. Music AI generates tracks that sound almost identical to famous artists. Image models mimic specific painters so closely that fans can't tell the difference. Writers worry that AI trained on their books can produce summaries or even spin-offs without credit. These are not abstract beats. Hey, playing right now in courts and in studios. Now we shift to ethics. Even if the law says something is legal, is it right? Should a photographer's style be mined by a machine without consent? Should an artist's voice be cloned into songs they never sang? Should a novelist's work be digested into a machine? Training diet with no acknowledgement? Consent? Credit? Compensation? These are not side notes. They are the melody of justice. And here comes the global remix. Different countries spin the record differently. Some move toward giving AI outputs copyright if there is human direction. Others insist only humans can be authors. Some propose collective licensing for training data, like sampling fees in music. But the setlist is slow being written, and every jurisdiction has its own rhythm. So how do we, as citizens and creators, dance responsibly in this club? First, recognize that AI can inspire new art, but also overwhelm markets. Balance is key. Second, demand transparency. Artists should know if their works are in the training mix. Third, push for fair models, compensation systems, credits, or opt-out options that keep creators in the loop. Finally, stay skeptical of hype. Not every AI track is genius. Not every remix is theft. Listen closely, judge carefully. The encore question: who owns creativity in the age of AI? Is it a right, a reward, a remix, or a commons? Real talk. Copyright was born in the printing press era, tuned for books and songs. Now the decks are digital, the sampler is infinite, and the DJ is artificial. The old rules can handle the new beats alone, but we must be careful. If we ignore copyright, we risk silencing artists. If we freeze AI, we risk stalling progress. The challenge is to write rules that let both flourish. So as we fade out tonight, remember this: art is not just property, too. Culture, memory, connection. AI is not just a thief or a savior, too. A tool, an amplifier. The question is how we tune it. Keep your ears sharp, respect the beat makers, and don't let the algorithm take the stage without the artists who built the samples. That's set for tonight. Catch you on the next drop.
When we think of copyright, we often think of ownership. We imagine the painter and the canvas, the composer and the score, the novelist and the manuscript. Copyright emerged as a way to honor these creators, to give the protection against copying, and to reward their efforts. But in the age of artificial intelligence, we must ask, what does authorship mean when the author may be a machine? Let us begin with the nature of creativity itself. Human creativity has always been dialogical. Shakespeare borrowed plots from older stories. Jazz musicians riffed on standards, transforming familiar tunes into something fresh. Hip-hop artists sampled existing records, turning fragments into new rhythms. We might say culture has always been a remix. If that is true, then why should AI learning from past works be treated as something different? And yet, there is a tension here. When Shakespeare borrowed, he borrowed from a common culture, not from a living novelist whose sales depended on the protection of her work. When jazz musicians borrowed, they did so in ways that transformed the material before a live audience. When hip-hop sampled, the law eventually required licensing fees, recognizing the rights of original artists. So the question becomes, is AI's use of massive datasets an extension of this cultural borrowing, or is it a new form of exploitation without consent? Consider what happens when an AI system is trained on millions of artworks, many of them copyrighted, without permission or compensation. The AI can then produce images in the style of those artists, sometimes so close that audiences cannot tell the difference. The living artist may find that her commissions dry up, replaced by a cheaper machine-generated imitation. Is this progress, or is it a kind of dispossession, where human labor is replaced not by innovation, but by imitation? Here we confront the moral core. Does training AI on copyrighted material without permission violate the dignity of creators? Or is it simply the digital equivalent of what human artists have always done? Earned from predecessors? Let us turn to authorship. Copyright law has long presumed that authors are human. But if a machine can generate a painting, a poem, or a song, who is the author? The programmer who wrote the code? The company that built the model? The user who typed the prompt? Or the AI itself? Some argue that authorship should always return to humans, that machines are tools, like paintbrushes or cameras, but others suggest that AI is different. Unlike a brush, which has no agency, AI systems generate outputs unpredictably, in ways not fully controlled by their users. If authorship depends on originality and agency, then can we deny that AI contributes something? Yet to grant authorship to machines raises unsettling questions. Do we give rights to entities that are not persons? Do we dilute the meaning of human authorship by extending it to algorithms? Next, let us consider fairness. Copyright law is supposed to balance two goals: rewarding creators and serving the public. Too little protection, and artists cannot live. Too much, and culture stagnates. Where does AI fit into this balance? If every use of copyrighted data for training requires explicit licensing, AI systems may become prohibitively expensive or impossible to build. Innovation may stall. But if AI can freely use all copyrighted material without compensation, artists may lose their livelihood. Why create if the machine can instantly replicate your style? The stakes are high. We must ask, what kind of cultural ecosystem do we want? One where machines dominate by consuming the work of humans? Or one where machines coexist with human creativity, supporting rather than replacing it? Now, think of justice. Imagine a photographer who has spent years developing a distinctive style. Her images are fed into an AI without her consent. Soon, anyone can generate her style with a few keystrokes. She receives no credit, no payment, no recognition. Is this just? Or is it a violation of her rightful claim to her labor and identity? The case of musicians is similar. AI models can mimic the voices of famous singers. They can create songs, as if sung by artists who never perform them. If those songs generate revenue, who deserves it? The fans may enjoy the novelty, but the singer voice, which is part of her very personhood, has been cloned. Here, copyright intersects with dignity. We must ask, is a voice a commodity to be copied or part of the person who owns it? Globally, the answers diverge. Some legal systems insist that only human works can be copyrighted. Others experiment with giving protection to AI-generated works if there is sufficient human input. Still others propose collective licensing for training data, akin to music sampling fees. But no consensus has emerged. The law is fragmented, just as the culture is fragmented. And yet, beyond law lies ethics. Even if courts permit AI training without consent, should we accept it morally? Should artists have a right to know whether their work is in the dataset? Should they have a right to opt out? Should there be mechanisms to ensure compensation, not only for the famous, but for the countless lesser-known creators whose works feed the machine? At this point, we might recall an older philosophical debate, the difference between using someone and respecting someone. Kant taught us that people should never be treated merely as means to an end, but always as ends in themselves. Does feeding someone work into an AI without permission treat them as a means, an input, for someone else, profit, rather than as an end, a creator whose dignity deserves recognition? And what about democracy itself? Culture is not only property, It's also a shared resource, a language of meaning. If AI transforms culture into a domain dominated by a few corporations that own the models, then democratic culture may shrink. Ordinary citizens may become passive consumers of machine-made culture, rather than active participants. Should we allow creativity to be concentrated in algorithms controlled by the few? Or should we insist on rules that keep the cultural commons alive? The ultimate question, then, is not simply legal, but moral. What do we owe to creators, to citizens, and to future generations in the age of AI? Do we owe artists protection so their labor is not stolen? Do we owe society openness so that AI can learn and innovate? Do we owe future generations a cultural environment where human voices are not drowned out by machine echoes? The answers are not simple, but asking these questions is itself an act of democratic responsibility. AI and copyright is not a technical puzzle for lawyers alone. It is a public question for citizens. It asks us, what kind of culture do we want? Do we want one where creation is respected, where machines serve human imagination, or one where machines consume human works without recognition, reducing art to data and culture to code? AI is not destiny, it is a tool. But how we govern it, whether we honor or exploit the human creators who came before, will decide whether AI amplifies democracy and culture or erodes them. So the challenge before us is clear, not only to regulate AI, but to deliberate about justice. Not only to ask what is efficient, but to ask what is fair.
Not only to decide what is legal, but to ask what is right, and that, in the end, is the democratic task we face together.